Working at a toll booth at night was boring, but it paid well and I really needed the money. My shift was from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. on a secondary road that was barely used. At first, I thought it would be a quiet job. It never crossed my mind to wonder why they paid so well for something that seemed so simple. I was never too bright, I admit. The toll booth where I worked was an old and claustrophobic structure, barely 2 by 2 meters, with foggy windows and a desk full of old papers. A small fan buzzed in the corner but couldn't clear the sticky heat of the night. The flickering ceiling lights cast strange shadows on the walls, and the road in front of me stretched out, empty and dark, disappearing into the horizon like an endless ribbon of asphalt. Outside the booth, the silence was almost complete, broken only by the hum of insects and the occasional creak of rusted metal equipment. There wasn't a soul for miles, just me, trapped in that lonely island of concrete and glass in the middle of nowhere. The supervisor, a disheveled-looking man with a gray beard and deep-set eyes, welcomed me and showed me the booth while explaining the controls and payment system. He seemed tired and rushed, like he had done this ritual too many times. However, suddenly, he pulled out a yellowed, crumpled piece of paper and handed it to me. He did it slowly, keeping his eyes on me, as if to make sure I received it 100%. "It's very important that you follow these rules," he said in a raspy voice, as if he were talking more to himself than to me. "Don't question them, no matter how strange they seem. Do what I say, and you might finish your shift." I read them, looked at him confused, and raised an eyebrow with a half smile. He kept staring at me seriously. "It's very important you don't question these rules. Follow them to the letter, and everything will be fine." "Can't you tell me why they're necessary?" I asked, trying to sound nonchalant, but something about his tone made me uneasy. He took a step toward the door, this time avoiding me completely. Before leaving, he turned toward me for a moment and looked at me. His eyes were filled with something I could only describe as ancient fear, worn out but ever present. "No, you don't want to know, just don't break them. Things happen here that are better left unknown." Without saying more, he walked away, leaving behind a sense of unease, and for the first time, I wondered what had happened to the previous employee. I glanced at the empty road, feeling the air in the booth grow heavy, oppressive. I went over the list of rules again. 1. If a car arrives between 12:30 and 1 a.m., make sure the driver has their eyes open. If they are closed, shut the window and lower the barrier, no matter how many times they honk. 2. Never accept bills or coins from anyone wearing red gloves. If they try to pay with money, refuse with an excuse. If they insist, cover your ears. The sounds you hear afterward are not meant for you. 3. Between 2 and 3 a.m., if you see a car without plates, let it through immediately. Don't try to talk to the driver or look at their face. If you stare for too long, you may see who, or what, is sitting behind them. 4. At 3:15 a.m., close all the windows and don't leave the booth for any reason. If you hear a voice calling your name, don't respond. The voice will know things about you, things no one else should know. 5. If you see a parked car in the distance, never mention it over the radio, no matter how long it stays there without moving. If you make contact with it, they will know you've seen it, and will be waiting for you at the end of your shift. 6. If an old rusted car arrives and the driver is a man who looks too thin, give him the exact change without looking up for more than 3 seconds. If you look directly at him, the air in the booth will start to smell rotten. Close your eyes and don't open them until the smell goes away. 7. If the toll system resets at 4 a.m., disconnect immediately for 5 minutes. Don't take any payments, and don't make eye contact with whoever is outside. The system shuts down to protect you from whatever is trying to get closer. 8. If a bus passes after 5 a.m. without its lights on, don't stop it. Don't try to charge, and don't ask any questions. 9. Never leave the booth between midnight and 6 a.m., no matter what you see outside. If you hear knocking or footsteps, stay calm. Whatever is out there can't come in unless you invite it. 10. If you see a rearview mirror hanging on the ground in front of your booth, silently collect the bills and never look at yourself in the mirror. 11. On new moon nights, close all the curtains inside the booth. The new moon brings more than just darkness. If you see a tall, slender figure walking down the road, hide under the desk and stay silent for 5 minutes. If you peek after that time and the figure is gone, you may continue. If the figure is standing in the road, motionless, leave the lights on, lock the door, and hide under the desk until your shift ends, even if the toll stops being collected. 12. Sometimes you'll see a small child crossing the road toward the toll. Don't talk to him or leave the booth. If the child starts crying, let him cry until he disappears into the darkness. I felt a little uneasy, but I decided to just see how things went as time passed. After all, I really needed this job, and the pay was still appealing. The first night was quiet with no incidents, and I started to think the rules were just simple superstitions or a kind of tradition to scare the newcomers. But the second night was different. It was 12:45 a.m. when a gray car pulled up to the toll. I remembered the first rule: make sure the driver had their eyes open. When I looked through the glass, the driver was motionless, with their eyes closed as if deeply asleep. I froze for a second. It occurred to me that it could be a mistake, maybe they were drunk or something. But when I saw they weren't moving at all, I knew something was wrong. I remembered the rule. I tensed up but lowered the barrier and shut the window as the protocol instructed. The car honked over and over, but I ignored it. Finally, it left. At 3:15 a.m., I closed the windows as the fourth rule indicated. I knew what was coming. Shortly after closing the last window, I heard a voice outside calling me. It was my mother. "Juan, open the door. Why aren't you answering? It's Mom." My mother was thousands of miles away, and I knew that thing wasn't her. I stayed silent, ignoring the call until the voice disappeared. Everything was going relatively well until 4 a.m. The toll system reset itself. Damn connection, I thought. I saw a car pull up. It was a black sedan, perfectly normal. A middle-aged man, looking tired, handed me some bills to pay the toll. I ignored the warning from the 8th rule and opened the window to charge him. At that moment I remembered the rule and froze, but quickly recovered to continue attending to the customer. I took the money. The man smiled at me. It was a faint smile, too forced, as if he wasn't used to smiling. When I raised the barrier and the car passed, I felt a sharp pain in the back of my head. A stabbing pain, an intense pressure. Suddenly I felt dizzy, like the air had been replaced with something dirty, toxic. The headache worsened, and then I felt it. Something was moving in the booth with me. I spun around, searching with my eyes, gasping, but there was nothing, or at least that's what I thought at first. I felt heavy breathing that wasn't mine, coming from the farthest corner of the booth. I don't know how, but I understood what was happening. I had broken a rule, and now something had entered. I tried to open the booth door to get out, but the lock wouldn't work. I was trapped. The stench suddenly became unbearable. My eyes started burning, and I blinked so fast that I could barely see. The headache worsened to the point where I could barely move, and I started bleeding from my nose, and then I understood. I wasn't getting out of that booth. The last thing I remember is the heavy breathing speeding up from the other side of the booth until it was breathing right by my ear. They never found me, but the toll booth keeps running. The new employee working my old shift has probably already received the rules. I hope he follows them.